Hello, hello. My name is April Malone with Yes, I Work From Home, and this is the podcast. Today I have a very old friend of mine with us today. It's Sean Riley. He lives in Minnesota, but he does not work in Minnesota. Come on in, Sean. How are you doing?
Hey, April. I'm not that old, April. I only have a little gray hair. None up here at all yet. So, old friend,
And,
but not that old yet.
well, we were 17 when we met. I think we had both. You maybe had just turned 18, like right when we met at the community college, like right around that same
Really,
week or so.
really close. Yeah, really close.
And I think you were about a month older than me. So we turned 18 right around the same time. We were, I don't know, fresh faced kids in the college setting we were both high school seniors, right?
PSEO, post-secondary enrollment option, right? Both going
Yeah.
to college while in high school. Yeah.
I think nowadays they call it like dual enrollment and all these other things, but it wasn't like we were taking high school classes and college classes at the high school. We were like literally on campus.
100% in
So,
college. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
full
As
time.
as juniors and seniors or something like that.
I
So,
was a I was a senior. Did you start in your senior year too?
I started taking classes actually in my sophomore year. I took electrical engineering classes, but I wasn't on campus all the time. Minnesota
Oh,
didn't allow that yet.
right.
So I did my first ones at Winona State,
Uh-huh.
and I took a couple classes there. Then my junior year, a couple classes. First year I did it full time was my senior year.
I
So
don't
my
think I
senior
knew
year
this
in high
about
school, I
you.
was full time in RCTC, or at
Yeah.
that time it was still RCC, I think.
I think it was RCTC, but I think they had just made that transition. So basically the
Yeah.
technical college and the community college were joining forces.
I remember being there for the unveiling of the new logo. So they
Oh,
were RCC and became RCTC somewhere
yeah.
while we were going to school there.
Oh,
So
wow. Yeah. Well, we met in, I want to say, and I'm going to screw this up. I think it was Dr. Lee's class. And the funny
could
thing
have been
about it,
Dr. Lee, English
I re
class, honors English, right?
actually
Like a
it was like
187 honors English or something like that.
no, it was like I feel like it was like 101. And I had never had okay, so I was homeschooled and my mom had bought a really nice English curriculum for me and I had a television in my room. And so she was working with my younger brothers and sisters at the time. My mom was like putting out a bunch of babies and focus on them. And I was pretty independent. And so I would go in my room and I'd pretend that I was working, but actually I was just reading novels and watching TV. And I ignored my English textbook for all of college or all of my high school years. And then I get to this, intro to English, whatever. I think it was mandatory. It was like 101, 102, 103, something like that. Um,
Hmm.
well, I struggled in that class and everything was a breeze for you because you actually probably had studied English.
Yeah, I don't remember ever taking a 101 class. I thought I started one.
It probably was something different. Yeah, I don't know. But it was like one of the mandatory ones. But the funny thing is that I just remember not knowing. I couldn't understand why his name was Dr. Lee or Dr. Lin or whatever it was. Um, and that's one part that I focus on is that he was doctor. And I was like, is he a medical doctor? Because I was so naive that I didn't even realize that you could get doctorates in other things other than medicine. So I was like really green faced when I came in. Yeah, a lot has changed. It's been a long time.
That's what
But
college is for.
yeah, learn a lot. So I think that we spent most of our time playing cards in the atrium
Hmm.
and hanging out. We kind of ended up with a collection of friends, and then you ended up marrying one of those friends.
Hmm. I did.
Did Did you meet
Yep.
Michelle through the school?
Yeah, we had a dance class together. So we I don't know if even really seen her much here and there walking around, but we had a dance class as our phy ed, and I went down there to the dance. It was down in the gym. It's way in the bottom back end of the school, and I had a class at like 3 o'clock, and the dance didn't start till 5:30, and I think she had kind of similar schedule. But I go down there just to sit in that atrium in front of the gym, and she was sitting there with a book that was about Henry VIII, and I'm a history nerd too, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "Oh, hey!" And I honestly didn't even notice there was like a girl behind the book. I just saw the book and I went, oh, and let's talk about Henry VIII. Yeah, so and uh, and because she thought I was weird, she made sure absolutely not to be my partner in the dance class.
Ooh,
So it
yeah.
was like, no, no. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. And that was easy for her because it was like 85% gals and about 15% guys. And
Okay.
so it was easy for her to avoid me. But we kept having that same connection over and over again, coming down to that classroom a couple hours early and talking and being there. And then at some point, she decides that we should go have spaghetti. And so we go to Hy-Vee, local grocery store. We go to Hy-Vee, and she wants spaghetti. I'm like, I live an hour away because I was still commuting from my actual home. I'm like, where are we going to do spaghetti? We'll do it at my parents' house. She says, okay, fine. So we go, and she just sits down in the spaghetti aisle on the floor and does this and stares up and down, going, I don't know what sauce we use. And some old guy walks by looking at her, going, there's this blonde gal sitting in the middle of the aisle. And she looks up at him and goes, what's the best spaghetti sauce? And he just kind of big eyes and he looks at me and he looks at her and he does a back and forth. A couple guys goes, this one. He just picks one off and hands it to her. And she jumps up all happy as a clam and off we go, buys the spaghetti and they go to her house. And the real test that I didn't know was the test was Othello. If you've ever played this game, right, it's
Oh, yes, the black and
64
white.
little squares. Yeah, the little black and white things, right?
Yeah, love it.
So I don't know that I'd played the game more than once or twice in my whole life. Well, this was her thing. Like, she is the goddess of Othello.
I was really
And
good
there
at it
was this
too.
challenge in her mind that men are only worthy if they're good at Othello. So I never really played the game, but I'm one of these math nerds. So I just look at the board and it's 64 squares and it's an 8 by 8 and it's a flip over, binary, well, real computer guy thing, right? Black and white. I'm colorblind, so it even appealed to me better. But so I look at this and I go, oh, I can do the math. So I win the game. And it irritates her so much that she says I have to come back for another dinner so she can play me on Othello. Couldn't care less about dinner. Didn't care less about me as like boyfriend. Nothing. Like it was just will win
Challenges on,
Othello.
yeah.
Yes. So she brings me over again, and I win. And she brings me over again, and I win. And then I win, and yeah, and I was on like a 7 game streak, and I'm finally at this point of fine. If I don't ever let her win, she's just going to start stabbing me. Um, if she were here, she would say that she won with her amazing power and game skills. But
But you know better.
I'm like this game's easy. It's a 8 by 8 grid on math with two
Yep.
options, a 0 and a 1 to me. I'm like, I can math this thing out of here. So, uh,
I
but
used to play that game online. Like there are people that are like brutal in that game, and you learn a few strategies, and it sounds like you figured it out quick.
I would imagine everybody who wins does the same thing. It's real simple strategies. But
Get the
but anyway,
corners. Yeah.
that ended up being the introduction, and many years later, with all kinds of complications, right? The story of my siblings. This is something I've talked about publicly before. I've done some speeches on, but my father was an alcoholic. My mother had all kinds of mental problems and drug problems, and uh, I ended up at the age of 22 ended up being the guardian of my 16, 14, and 12-year-old siblings,
Mhm.
and all that. And Michelle still put up with all that, and she still put up with me,
Yeah.
and we ended up getting married. And you were there for the wedding,
Yeah.
the super super ice storm wedding where the semi jackknifed right in front of all the maids of honor and the
Oh.
bride in their car, and the semi jackknifed in front of them and the semi jackknifed behind them, and they're stuck in their car looking around going crap.
Oh my gosh. I don't think I knew that part of the story.
Yeah.
But actually, so it's kind of weird. Like the people that we know in our life, and like this random person that I knew in college, and like I had been in like your childhood home, you'd been in my childhood home, like we were just good friends. Well, when I came to your wedding, I met Steve Curry. He was a photographer, and we had some photography chat, and I ended up working with him and his wife for several jobs doing photography. And then through Steve, I met some people, and then through those people, I ended up relocating to down. I met a whole bunch of wonderful people down in Missouri, and found
Mm.
a church that I really liked there. And I was living in Missouri for a couple of years, and my husband had also moved to Missouri to be closer to his brother. And lo and behold, we met in Missouri, and I can trace it back to the connections that I met through you, actually. So thank you for introducing me to my husband in a very roundabout way. It's just weird, like
It's the randomness of the universe.
it
So
is. It's cool though. I like to think about that. Um, so we had known each other in college, and then we went our separate ways. And you married a friend, and you still live in the same area where my parents live. I think you guys are only maybe 15, 20 minutes away. So in rural Minnesota.
yes,
But you work for North Dakota, and you
yes.
usually live there. So, okay, let me just say this. Sean is one of the smartest people I know. And I always feel a little intimidated talking to you because I just know that you could probably like just wipe the carpet with me as far as like proving me wrong and all the things. But I feel like we have, a lot of history. And so it's fun. So would you be willing to just talk a little bit about your journey and how you got to now? Like, I know I've been on your farm. I know your wife. I know about your kids. But why don't you let everyone else know how you got to now?
Yeah. So that could be a 10-hour conversation or a book.
We got about
But
20 minutes.
all right, all right. Uh, so really, I'll do the super fast version. I was born in Minnesota, moved to Tennessee because my parents were going to college in Tennessee at UT Knoxville. When they were there, my father decided to be able to pay their way through college by being a blacksmith at what was then Silver Dollar City. Today it's
Oh,
Dollywood.
we lived
But
near
at the
there.
time, Silver Dollar
Oh,
City.
the other
Yep.
one. Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
The other one, not the one in Missouri, but the one in
Right.
Tennessee,
Okay.
the one
Yep.
that's next to Knoxville. Yeah. And interesting times, but as I said, my parents had all kinds of addiction problems, and my parents had grown up in abusive situations. And for myself and my four siblings, life growing up, uh, the best word I ever use is entertaining. Right? It
Mm,
wasn't a good time.
mm.
And as time went on, we moved back to the Minnesota area. We were in La Crosse, Wisconsin for a little while. We were supposed to go to Alaska, but we went from La Crosse, Wisconsin, all the way to Lanesboro, Minnesota, which is about 45 miles away, and
And a
stopped there. Um,
beautiful city, by the way. Like
it
we
is.
would go
It
there for
is.
vacation. If we ever needed to build a cabin, I'd think we'd try to put it in Lanesboro.
It is. It's a beautiful little town there, and it was on a whole bunch of magazines as one of the most picturesque small towns in America, kind of thing. Beautiful little area there. But went to Lanesboro, and in Lanesboro, my parents' issues kind of festered, and the other complications came about. So as kind of things went on, I end up I end up going through a whole bunch of things that were just kind of crazy. So we end up getting taken out of the home, getting put back in the home. Um, there was massive abuse stuff going on. We have a guy who ended up hanging from a ceiling fan in our living room. I mean, it was just, all the kind of stuff that you could throw into a cable TV movie at some point if you wanted to. But it's a long story. But what it came down to is a few people in the community kind of took pity on us as the kids, and a gentleman by the name of Hyatt King, he asked me to learn with him, and I'm like, okay. Um, and he started teaching me a little bit about technology and business, and I had picked up a little here and there. Another gentleman in the community, he worked for American Express, and he asked me to come over and work on his Windows 3.1 computer.
Mm-hmm.
And that Windows 3.1 computer, he goes, what are you going to charge me? And to be honest, I was like, I'm not at home. I'm happy as can be, you know. And he goes, how long have you been here? I'm like, a little over an hour. He goes, here's $20. I'm like, $20? Holy, wow, Uh, and with that, he then, next time I met with him, he says, so what are you going to call your company? So what company? What are you talking about? And he walked me through the process of starting an LLC. And I actually then, at the age of 16, I had 300 some different customers from around Southeast Minnesota to build websites, and a bunch of other customers to fix computers, and a bunch of other customers to do cable modem installs. I was working with Bresnan and Charter and those guys. So here I'm a 16-year-old with a business. Frankly, not because I'm super smart. I know you said I'm super smart, but it's not because of that. It was because I wanted to eat, and so did my siblings.
Yeah.
Um, that then started propelling things forward. And over the years, I end up in court with my parents multiple times. And by the time I get to September the 4th of 2001, this is everybody who lived through that era remember September 2001. But for me, I remember it for two things. But the week before 9/11, I have a duplex in Rochester, Minnesota. At the time, I had a duplex in Rochester, Minnesota. I lived in the upstairs, and I was laying on my couch, and all of a sudden I hear this rustling on my back deck. I walk out the back, and my father's standing there with this garbage bag of stuff, and standing next to him is my two brothers and my sister, and he drops the bag on the deck, and he looks at me, and he goes, they're your problem now. And he walks down the steps, he gets in his car, and he squeals the tires around the corner, and he's gone. And there, all of a sudden, I'm a 22-year-old kid with a
Father of
16,
three.
14, and 12-year-old kid.
Yeah.
My one sister, who was 18, was out of the home by then, so she didn't live with us. But
Mm-hmm.
I had to figure this stuff out, and you survive, you adapt, you overcome. That's all there is, right?
And
That's
it was
that's
right
what
before you were
everybody
getting
would do.
married. And when you did get married, you had a baby in that next year, and like everything was just propelling. I remember visiting your home, and it was cool because you would have, everyone had their own computers, and you were having like LAN parties, and you'd walk in, and it was like 20 below in February, and you'd be like, yeah, we had to open the windows because it's too hot in here
Yep,
from all of the computers and people.
yep.
But yeah.
That was
Um,
that was back when monitors were very big and
oh, yeah.
very, very heating.
Like little furnaces. Another thing I remember from back when we were in community college together is that you were also teaching community like community classes, community ed type
Yep.
classes for learning computer skills for like say the older generation.
Yeah, it was strange, right? I was 16, 17 when I started teaching classes, and everybody was always older than me, and usually by a lot.
Yeah.
It was the grandparents trying to set me up with their granddaughters kind of thing all the time. It happened all the time. But it was yeah, it was interesting. But what it led me to this kind of this adapt and overcome spirit, and this idea of trying to figure out how do you herd cats while
Hmm.
being the mouse,
Mm.
and how do you try to help to move the world around you that outranks you, where everybody outranks me, and yet I still need to be able to help and move the world. And it moved me into this other aspect that when I was in my early 20s, all I wanted to do was conquer the world. And I will say, right, I grew up in this environment that was not good for me and not good for anybody. But I was an angry person. It was very difficult to wrap my head around the troubles of the world. and uh, but I started learning about myself, and I started learning about who I was and what I wanted to become. And what that led me to was this mindset that instead of trying to conquer the world, I want to do something to help the world.
Yeah.
So by 2004, as I'd been working for IBM at that point, an interesting story from working from home. Here I am in 2004. My team members, my boss was in Raleigh, Durham, in North Carolina. My primary team was in Austin, Texas. My secondary team was in Toronto, and my other secondary team was in Osaka, Japan. And we worked together all the time, right? And I actually, when I started doing that in 2001 ish, 2002 ish with IBM, uh, that became normal for me. Where having my boss, on the other side of the country and our team all over the world, that just became the normal thing.
Were you all in offices just all over the place and having to just communicate electronically? Or was anyone working from
Most of
home
the
too?
time we were in offices. It wasn't in your home as much, but there were people who did that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was certainly fewer people at that point.
Mm-hmm.
When I was working for IBM, and I decided, hey, I want to go do something else to help the world, because I want to do something to make people's lives better instead of just make more people more money. I went to Mayo Clinic, and at Mayo, I started as the help desk manager over three people, and that was at the Austin campus, the Austin, Minnesota campus.
Right.
And within a few months, I was the manager of the help desk, the networks, the servers team, and the programming team. And a few months after that, I'm the director of IT. And a few months after that, I am the CIO for the Austin and Everett Lee. So over my career, very, very quickly, I was a CIO, a CTO, the CMO, CMI, CMIO, I think, COO, et cetera, et cetera. To the point where my wife thought it was hilarious to poke my daughter, our actual daughter at the time, to put together a sign and glue it to my office door that said Chief EIEIO. So that was, and that's my favorite title. I still claim the Chief EIEIO title. Um, but we worked through in that environment where ultimately I was reporting directly to the CIO of the health systems, and then I ended up reporting to the vice president of operations for all of Mayo Clinic. But in those environments, we had people all over the country, and so for the team that reported through me, we had managers in 22 cities across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
Our teams were even in more communities because
Mm-hmm.
we had IT on the ground everywhere. Ultimately, by the time I started on the enterprise side, the teams were across 7 different states. So we had Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, and Massachusetts. And our teams were across all those 7 states. And in those environments, you have to figure out how to work from home. You have to figure out how to telecommute. You have to figure out how to manage organizations at a distance.
Mm-hmm.
And so we go through having all these cool titles, and what I became known for at Mayo was basically taking on the projects nobody else wanted to do. Basically, the hard stuff. So, demand management for 19 hospitals and 72 clinics, the consolidation of IT for the entire Mayo Clinic health
Mm-hmm.
system, the complete upheaval of all network environments across 436 locations across all of Mayo, all that kind of stuff.
So I was
So,
actually working for Mayo during those years as well as a teleworking transcriptionist. So I worked on site from I think it was like 2001 ish until 2008, and then I went and I moved home teleworking. So not only did you have people across all of these things, but like you said, the help desk was overseen. When they unified it, they were overseen. So then you had people in like literally, I think all the continental U.S.
yep.
Probably. Did they have Hawaii too? But yeah, people could live anywhere. And so then they were supporting everyone. Like I was in the middle of the night, so I was talking to people in Florida in the middle of the night. And so I'm assuming that probably you were overseeing a lot of that when I was actually like an employee.
Yes, yes, and a lot of great stuff that was going on, and it gave me this reputation for being a crazy CIO because I'd take on stuff that nobody else would take on. And along then comes further growth in my career, but Governor Doug Burgum in North Dakota. And if you don't know Governor Burgum at all, he is an IT guy through and through.
Oh wow.
Made his fortune and made his career on technology. really truly believes in his heart that we can make the lives of people better through the use of technology. And I had this reputation for being the crazy CIO, and they were quote unquote looking for a crazy CIO. And so they're searching around. They asked me to apply. I go apply. And with these conversations, um, the governor asked me to come up to North Dakota, and it's in the middle of legislative session. So, I'm a Mayo Clinic guy for the last 13 years, so I show up suit and tie. Legislators everywhere, suit and tie, the whole mess. Bustling everywhere, kind of thing. And you just kind of expect that. Well, they asked me to come in and interview with the governor, so I go down the little hallway and go into his office, and pop open the door and then come in, and here's standing this gentleman in blue jeans and just a blue jacket, and he rolls this big purple yoga ball up to the side of a table, and he sits down on it and goes, "Please sit down, let's talk." And I'm like, okay, I kind of like this guy. So I sit down with him, and he tells me about how he wants to be able to make people's lives better. And he walks through education and infrastructure and agriculture and all of these different things that government works with, and all of these different things that we could do to really be able to make the world a better place. And here he is, one of the busiest people you've probably ever seen, because he's constitutionally mandated to meet with legislators for at least 15 minutes each, kind of thing, right? Middle of legislative session, meetings everywhere. Everybody wants his time, and he spends 2 hours talking to me. And at the end of this, he goes, "So, what do you think?" And I'm like, "Well, sir, I have to talk to my wife, but I'm in." So that's in Bismarck, North Dakota. Our farm is in southeast Minnesota.
How long of a
So
commute is that?
we are about 8 hours away from each other, 511 miles door to door.
Mm.
And I'm going, how do we make this work? Well, the amazing thing is the governor is, like I said, he's an IT guy. Well,
Mm-hmm.
he's worked in these multi-state, multinational organizations his whole life, and so have I now. And the reality is he says, "So what? Be where you need to be when you need to be there." And
Mm-hmm.
I go, "That's great. That's kind of how I like to act anyway." So when I need to be in Bismarck, I'm in Bismarck. When I need to be somewhere else in the state, Fargo or Grand Forks or Minot or wherever it needs to be, I am there. But on the other hand, is when I don't need to be there, I can be down here.
Yeah. So
And the reality is, yep,
I know you guys did like a big hunt trying to find property that you could all be happy with up in North Dakota, and that went on for some time.
yep, and we tried to get a farm, and that's a little more complicated in the Bismarck area to get a farm that meets the needs of my wife, and and she has chickens and ducks and turkeys and geese and bunnies and bees, and basically any critter that is either furry or flies is fair game. So all critters are fair game for her. So we have all these critters everywhere, and she really wanted to be able to keep that experience for the kids and really keep the farm territory.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy the land and everything that
Mm-hmm.
goes with it.
Well, and she was
And it's
really
just,
involved in the school system and with the kids and them in 4-H and all the things. And
yeah,
so at one point, you finally just decided, let's just do both.
that's what we decided. We said, well, let's just do both. So I bought a townhouse on the Missouri River. So I've got a little dock out the back. The guy who never learned to swim because it just never happened, now get in a kayak and I row 4 miles every day that I can kayak.
Wow.
Not so much, right now, but
Did you
but
learn how to swim?
no, not yet. I wear a life jacket.
Good idea. Good plan.
Yeah, I wear the big life jacket. So, but no, I like to kayak and I go back and forth kayaking. But that's kind of my evening thing when I'm up there. But yeah, we figured out how to have a two-state, two-location home. I go back and forth. The kids go back and forth with me sometimes. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, when we're in tele-school environment, actually all three of the kids graduated last year out of their Minnesota school from Bismarck
Wow.
because they were all working at our place in Mandan, which is the west side of the river, the better side of the river. But anyway, we were on the west side of the river in Mandan, but they all took their last about 10 days of school from up there because
Hmm.
there was no difference in where they were, and it was super convenient to be able to kind of go wherever we wanted to go and still be able to do school, and I can still do work, and Michelle can do everything except feed the critters remotely.
So let's talk about why you're working out of Minnesota right now. Do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, so right now, this one's a little harder right now, but we're in the middle of legislative session. I would love to be in person for this, but my wife had a little skiing accident back in January, and the skiing
Returning
accident,
the boots
she,
accident or returning the skis accident?
yeah, putting the skis away, she falls on something and dislocates her knee, tears her MCL and her PCL, which is sad. Um, but this is something, I guess, when you think about how technology's enabled us. So I was actually in Bismarck. This is January 31st. I was there for a John Maxwell conference. I had lunch with John Maxwell that day, and then we're going to his event. And while in the middle of his event, my son Alex calls me. And Alex only calls me for two things: either something that is completely unnecessary to call me for, or something that is massively necessary to call me for. And there's no in between. So I look at it and I go, hmm, all right, I'll think about this. And then about 5 minutes later, he calls me again. I go, okay, that's the problem. So then I jump out of the meeting quickly. And sure enough, he's like, yeah, mom dislocated her, broke her leg, is what he said at that point, because that's what they knew. But so here I am in a car, then driving the 8 hours back to Minnesota as fast as I can that evening.
Yeah.
And where in a different environment, I would have been in a lot of trouble, to be honest, because Michelle's immobile, or was completely immobile at the beginning of her healing process. She's more mobile now, but still needs kind of that field nurse, and I suck at that. I know she's going to watch this later. I want everybody to know I suck at being a field nurse and take no
but you're
credit for
but you're
anything.
really good at installing bird feeders so that she can see out the
Oh
window.
yes, I installed bird feeders and I put all the cameras in for the baby goats so she can see all the baby goats. I can do that stuff. I suck at field nursing, but I'm trying. Um, but no, so it's made it possible. I've actually been testifying remotely. I just yesterday testified on a $398 million bill that we have for a technology package within the state of North Dakota. And it's about 3 hours of testimony. My piece of it was about 45 minutes or so yesterday. I did the entire thing from here, from our farm here in Minnesota, and testify there. I wear a tie when I'm on with the legislature, but other than that, it's about the same. Um, but other than the tie, yeah, it's about the same. You get on video and you talk with an entire committee. And I've testified remotely. I don't know, a dozen and a half times already so far this year,
Wow.
on different bills and different structures and budgets and all that kind of stuff. So it's been um, challenging to a point because it's harder that I can't see every legislator as easily
Mhm.
when it's because they're always big rooms and there's somewhere between 6 and 25 people in the room.
And the
But
cameras
at
are
the same
probably a
time,
little spotty.
yeah. So it's hard to be able to see the individuals you need to be able to talk to. But other than that, it's actually been a really good experience. And when you've been in the smaller rooms, when it's 3 to 4 legislators and subcommittees as they're called, you get in those subcommittees that actually works very very well.
Yeah.
And the reality is this is all new for the legislators too, because this is all new to us. Um, Compliments of COVID back in March of last year, so on the 13th of March of 2020, North Dakota went into its state of emergency.
Mm-hmm.
Within the following week, we were given an executive order to evacuate all government premises.
Yeah.
So the IT teams, we moved about 7,000, well, it's more than 7,000 people in 48 hours from their on-prem in businesses, in buildings to home. And so 7,000 people that had never worked at home before just all of a sudden moved.
Can I ask a question
Then,
about that?
yeah.
When I worked for Mayo Clinic, they didn't allow people to work from home remotely for years because of confidentiality issues. And they wanted to make sure that we had, like, they gave us Cisco boxes and, like, VPNs and all the different ways to, like, keep things secure. When you're working on that kind of time frame, I'm sure there was zero time to put any of those structures into place. So were people just like Wi-Fiing it at home?
So we had one huge advantage is that we had for the 2 years ahead of that already been working on models to enable cybersecurity in all those environments.
Because this is like your
And, the,
passion
and
too, right?
yep, and I'm a big cybersecurity guy, and I've got people who work for me way smarter than me, but I make up for it in enthusiasm. Um,
You're so
and
humble.
and it's really it's the cornerstone of today's world. So when you think about cybersecurity and the government information, right? So if you were to go to Target, right, and Target loses your data, you as a consumer have a choice. You can go to Walmart, right? If Walmart loses your data, you have again a choice. You can go to Shopko, right? You can, well, maybe not Shopko anymore. You could go to Amazon. You can go somewhere else, right? You can always go somewhere because you have a choice as a consumer. As a government entity, what happens when the state you work for loses your data, right? The state you live in loses your data. Pretty much all you can do is just put your face in your hand and start crying, right? There's nothing you can do. Maybe you can move to North Dakota where you can get better security, but other than that, there's not a lot of options. The reality is that government has a moral responsibility to keep your data safe because we force you to give it to us so that you can live within the environment you're in. So we have to take better care of our information. And that is something that we had started doing a couple years ahead of the pandemic in a comprehensive cybersecurity redesign. And that is something that's just huge in the state of North Dakota, cybersecurity. You can go see we're a national leader there.
Good.
But when it came to this event and everybody going home, yeah, we weren't prepared to do this in 48 hours. Um, we definitely were not prepared to do it in 48 hours, but most people were able to go home and get hooked up and be secure right out of the gates because we were designed to do that.
Good.
Now, we did have to make a ton of additions and changes. We did see also a huge uptick in cyber attacks, but this is also nationwide and worldwide, is because lots of bad actors out there were using COVID, frankly, taking advantage of the situation to go and attack folks everywhere.
Right. So, and then when you had this 20 or this 48-hour lead time, you had already had some systems in place, and then you've had almost a year, and then your wife, which, by the way, your wife is just like this ray of sunshine. I love her. Um, and so, like, I'm so happy that you guys ended up together because, just coming from, some dark times, it feels like things have really brightened up there. Then when she got injured, you had also had systems in place over the course of the year, because a year ago on March 13th, you wouldn't have been able to testify from home.
That's right. So a year ago, we wouldn't have been able to do that. Um, the reality is that um, the legislature wasn't set up to be that way yet. We had an advantage that this was in what's called an interim period, so you were between legislatures.
Mm.
Um, and just one good thing of timing, I guess, as much horrible timing as everything happened with COVID and everything with it.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that was advantageous for timing, it also gave us several months to be able to to really be able to prepare technology in different ways. So we sent all these folks home. And when we send 7,000 folks home in 48 hours, the reality is that it's a much bigger picture than that, right? So K-12 went home, higher ed went home, judicial branch went home, legislative branch went home, executive branch went home, and that 48-hour window was just basically like one set of buildings that we just went in one shot. But all of everybody within about a 10-day period of time started going home. And then what ended up happening is we had to figure out how to enable government to continue doing the work that it's supposed to do, right? So we're trying to figure out how can we turn on systems to allow all of these different aspects of government to keep on operating. And now my our team's responsibility is mostly around the executive branch, but
Mhm.
we have technology that we offer out to all aspects of government in North Dakota. So in on a day over day basis, we've got 250,000 customers directly to my team
Oh,
that we
wow.
have to serve and we have to help them get their work done.
So, a question about this: when you're sending everyone home, and you're going home too, were people allowed to take equipment from their offices to make it easier for them to set up their offices at home? Because some people have had to just go with a laptop and that's it. What about you guys?
Yep. So we had lots of laptops, and basically anybody who had a laptop, take it with you. If they were in a desktop environment, take it with you. We
Chairs,
had
monitors.
Yep, monitors, docking stations, mice. Even in my situation, you can't see this on my camera, but I've got a Veridesk here. I've took my Veridesk with me, and in my case, I've literally got a $19 plastic table that I bought at Walmart that sits underneath a standing Veridesk because the standing Veridesk doesn't have its own legs. It's supposed to sit on top of a platform.
Oh,
Um,
I don't even know what a Veridesk is. Can you just enlighten
it
me?
raises up and sits down. You pull the little levers on the side so that you can have a standing desk.
Okay.
So I brought I for myself, right. I brought my monitor, I brought all my cables, I got my keyboard, my mouse, my little Veridesk, and it depended on the situation for everybody. Now, of course, nobody planned to do this, so folks were going home, and we had about 400 IT staff running all over the cities of Bismarck and Mandan, mostly, and a little bit in Fargo, a little bit in other communities, Jamestown, etc. But mostly in Bismarck and Mandan, going through buildings, helping people disconnect, taking photos of all their stuff. We had our communications team running 100%. In fact, the whole group, I mean, we had almost everybody in IT working 100-hour weeks through March and
Oh,
into
man.
April. We finally got down to fewer hours for some people, but I still had staff who were doing the 80-hour and 100-hour weeks from March all the way through December before we finally were able to start getting people out of that.
Oh, wow.
But we put together a comms plan literally in a matter of 2 hours, and we just took some cameras because we have some cameras for video that are there at the state for different projects. And we said, IT guy, get in front of the camera. I don't care that you're an introvert. Tell people how to do this. And we did the recordings right there on the spot. And here's how you do this. Here's this cable. You plug it in here. Here's this. See, take a look. And they did the videos. And then they'd move out. And another person come in and show them something else. And we took those videos and we just live streamed the videos. And then we threw them on a bunch of websites and said, watch these quickly, then take your stuff apart and go.
Wow.
And yeah, and with about 400 IT staff running all over these buildings everywhere, even myself. So I'm chief information officer, cabinet member, the whole thing. I literally had my phone with an inventory list on it, and I'm running up and down floors in the buildings, going through checking people off in a little checklist on my phone. And saying, okay, this floor is empty. This floor is empty. This one still got 3 people on it. Send someone here. And myself and my chief data officer, Dorman, we were both in the Capitol building for the final day of evac and just going up and down floors and walking around and checking everybody out. But we sent everything home, and people did what they had to do. So I would say a vast majority of people were set up on their kitchen table for
Yep.
the first couple of weeks. They just set up wherever they had to.
Hmm.
Uh, the the local towns, Bismarck, Mandan, Lincoln, all those towns, they ran out of tables. Like you couldn't
Hmm.
buy a table, you couldn't buy headphones,
Hmm.
you couldn't you couldn't get a webcam to save your life.
Hmm.
We because I had a little bit of lead time. Given the job I have, I also work with the Department of Defense, and I had been out in Washington, D.C. about 10 days earlier for a briefing there, and things were very interesting in that briefing. So when I came back, I said, order some equipment, order it now.
Good
So
idea.
we, yeah, so we happened to have 1,000 webcams. We bought 1,000 extra webcams. They were gone the first couple days, and then
Wow.
we ordered another 1,500, and we didn't get those in for months. Laptops we couldn't get, none of this equipment, but
I'm
it was an adventure.
I remember trying to order a headset for my kids to do online school, and it was like the bottom of the barrel, like on Amazon or whatever. You didn't get to choose the one that you wanted. You just got what was there. It was pretty interesting. I feel
Yeah,
like March 13th is going to be like burned into our memory, kind of like September 11th. Like I remember
yeah.
exactly every single thing that I bought at Target that day. It was my last time into the store, and it's like I think we're gonna all. It's going to take a few years to recover from. Did I hope those people that work so hard, those 100-hour weeks, did they get a nice vacation at the end of that? I hope.
Well, that's part of the problem, right? Is one is there was nowhere they could go,
Yeah,
and two, everybody's hours have been so high that nobody's been able to take a vacation yet.
yeah,
So
yeah.
my teams, we have 30,000 hours of unpaid overtime that we did connected to
Mm,
COVID, and all of us have stacked our PTO up
yeah,
galore, and
yeah,
so nobody's taking PTO yet.
yeah.
Nobody's taking vacations yet.
It's
We're
coming.
hoping here as the vaccine rolls out that that's
Yeah.
something we can start sending people to do.
Staycation, man. Do a
That, that's
staycation.
that's about it. Yeah.
Speaking of vaccines, I actually unexpectedly got mine the other day, and I'll just say it right now because there's wait lists, and if you ever go to like a pharmacy or grocery store or a big box store that has a pharmacy, there's oftentimes a way that you can get on a wait list for the unused doses at the end of the day that wouldn't otherwise go into someone's arm. They'll give it to anybody, and so I walked into our pharmacy 10 minutes before closing, and I said, don't be frustrated with me, but I just have a question. Do you by any chance have a wait list for those unused wasted doses? And she's like, actually, do you want to get one right now? And I was like, thank you. Yes. Thank you. Wow. Oh my goodness. And so I did get one that day. It was just a few days ago. Hey Sean, we are going on 2 minutes before your next meeting. Do you want to wrap things up
I can keep going. I mean,
for a
literally the
few?
meeting I have on the other side is another person's meeting, and I go for information. So if you
Okay.
want to keep going, I can keep going
Let's
if you
keep
want.
going for a few more minutes. So changing gears, I wanted to bring up one more memory from way in the past, back when we were kids. When I graduated from high school, my parents bought me a computer, and I wasn't allowed to take it with me to college. They wanted me to keep it in my parents' bedroom because they were, concerned about the internet and wanting to make sure that it was being monitored. And even though I was an adult, they gave me this Gateway 2000. Do you remember that?
I do. I had a Gateway 2000.
But I had mine
Yeah, a
first, and you
Pentium
were
133 Gateway
you were
2000.
you were
Yes.
jealous.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
it have like 6 gig, or was it was like
Oh, I
super
remember.
huge?
Yeah, yeah. It was like 6 gigs of hard drive.
Uh
So it
huh.
was like super, super awesome then.
Yeah,
And now I have this little thing, which you probably can't even see right here, right? Here you go.
a
Itty
little
bitty little
micro.
card that's about the thickness of a piece of paper. This particular one's 32 gigs, but I have one sitting here that's 128.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It's amazing technology. I was just teaching an English class, and they're talking about how technology has changed. And one of the biggest things, well, biggest, is that it gets smaller. The more
yes.
advanced we are, the smaller it gets. So you're managing a team now. Can you talk a
Yes.
little bit about like what that feels like? I mean, maybe even outside of the pandemic stuff, um, helping people to adjust to the idea of working from home. Do people ever work from home normally in your field?
Yeah, so IT is one of the fields that is more acclimated to working from home. who are very used to working remotely. I would say it's not often that you find an organization that's working from home this consistently
Mm-hmm.
as we've had to do through the pandemic. But doing it on a regular basis is very, very normal and has been for 20 years.
Okay. Yeah.
So the the interesting part, though, so some things that I guess I didn't expect we'd be in. So I have an executive team, multiple executive officers in that executive team, and there's directors and leaders and all through this. And the executive officers, I have one that we hired this year who was our chief customer success officer.
Okay.
And it's a very important role that helps us interact with our customers and make sure that they're getting what they need. And I actually didn't meet with him in person until 4 months after he was already in the job. So the entire interview process was online. The entire onboarding was online. When he came in, he had never physically met with any of the other executives. And I think, yeah, starting from July, I think it rolled until I think it was October or November before I could actually physically meet with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've only met with him twice physically now. And yet he's an executive officer who I talk to almost daily,
Mm-hmm.
cornerstone of the team, has a huge portion of the team. And we have directors. In fact, one of our directors of cybersecurity, I had actually never seen his face until until 4 or 5 months after, because I think there was a video problem when we did the interview, so it couldn't see the video.
Yep.
And then after he got on, well, he's a cyber guy, and the cyber guys don't tend to like to turn on the cameras all the time, because they have stuff around them that can be
Yep.
security related.
Oh, right.
So it was like months in, and I'm like, huh, I wonder what this guy looks like. And I had to go Google him to go look up the staff member that we had, and it's so that's definitely different. And I think some other things that are different. It's very strange, but you're in a physical world, and you get in a meeting room, and the relationship building happens in the first, say, 3 to 5 minutes of every meeting, right? So you bring the exec team together, or directors, or no matter what team it is, right? They get together, and the first 3 minutes, it's, hey, how was your weekend?
Yeah.
How's the kids? Did you enjoy the fishing trip? Right? It's something personal that creates a connection with
Yeah.
people that's helping to build that relationship. And in the physical world, that's almost automated.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody just does it. You spend a few minutes, and you kind of know that, hey, we're 3 minutes in, 5 minutes in. Okay, let's get to the business now, and we'll get to the topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you came in and just sat down and said, okay, we're here for this and this and this, people will get offended by that,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But in the virtual world, it's the other way around.
Uh
The
huh.
automated aspect, people, and I'm not sure why, but they get on the schedule of these automated meetings and these video meetings. And so the meeting pops up, and instantly it's, all right, we're here today to be able to, and they completely lose that interpersonal connection.
Yeah. I know
And
some people
that's
are
something
trying to
we've
kind of.
seen with automate.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's it's something that we've had to now start doing intentionally. So we'll start the meeting with the first agenda item is relationship time, so that we take that 3 to 5 minutes to go, how's the kids? How was the fishing trip?
Mm-hmm.
Blah blah blah. Um, that's been different,
I
and
feel like
we're
there's a.
spending a lot more time in that performance management kind of
Yeah.
very focused on it.
I feel like there's some sort of like feeling that people have when they're working from home, or they have to show that they're working when they're working from home. And that's, I think that must be one reason why people are like business only. And also, we've got Zoom etiquette rules. Like you should
Yeah.
have your camera off, or your camera on and your microphone off, and people just sit there staring at each other. And some managers have had to be very like proactive, and it can almost probably feel forced for some people. But like, hey, we're gonna have our coffee hour or a team building meeting or something like that. My husband has been working from home for a year, and they had their very first like basically happy hour or team building meeting that they had like actually scheduled in 1 year. Maybe it was because they had the anniversary of, working from home that they finally were like, oh, we should probably do this. But I
Hmm.
don't think it happens really much, but or very much. But I have other friends who actually schedule it, for their team once a week or once a month. But I like what you're thinking. Just throw it in for the first 3 minutes every meeting, most meetings, and just get it done naturally, more naturally.
Yep. Pretty much any meeting that has new people for the day in it. Um, if you have a recurring meetings with the same people, we tend to do it the first meeting, maybe the second,
Yeah.
but then it kind of rolls. Uh, the other side is we encourage humor. It's okay to still have jokes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird because you don't have to do any of this stuff in the real world, but in the virtual world, you have to kind of encourage people. It's okay to have fun. You can still pop
Mm-hmm.
a joke. Yes, your background can be silly. You can have something fun there. Um, and it's interesting, but we try to kind of re-engage that and bring it forth. Uh, then the other side, and so as you said, people are trying to prove they're working. Then you have managers who, frankly, come from the old school of life, who are 1970s and 1980s managers. They may be a whole lot younger than that, but they still have that mindset. And they believe that if they can't stare at your computer screen or look over your shoulder, they don't know if you're working.
Right.
And it amazes me because most of those kind of managers, you'll talk to them, and before the pandemic, I would get this all the time. Oh, we can't send people home. I don't know what they're working on.
Mm-hmm.
I go, okay, do you know what they're working on right now? Because you're not staring at them, you're staring at me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is a misconception, misunderstanding of business, right? Staring at your staff doesn't mean they're doing the right work,
Right.
right? It's you need to have structured process that understands what is the demand on that individual and what are the results that you're expecting
Mm-hmm.
and what are the outcomes that you're intending to get.
Yeah.
And those things should be managed through the manager. And what
Mm-hmm.
you'll find is you're going to find a lot of managers that don't know that. And they've simply always managed by feel rather than managed through process.
Or
And that's
creating
something
it,
we're having to really evolve really
or
fast.
creating like an atmosphere of fear. Like you're going to have repercussions if you don't do it exactly the way that I expect you to, versus a feeling of trust. Um,
Yes.
and I've talked with people who are kind of on both sides. Like even in
Yep.
these interviews that I've done, some people are allowing their teams to have a very flexible schedule to accommodate, especially during the pandemic. Like, I needed to care for my children, or I've, got some household responsibilities that, rather than having a commute, maybe I'm going to have like a longer lunchtime, and take care of a few things. Um, I want to keep going, but I know we're running short on time. I have another thing I want to ask you about. That was one of my main reasons I wanted to talk to you. Since I mentioned that you live in that rural area near my parents, when I go to visit my parents, I cannot work from their home. They live down by, it was the Zembro River. They live in a tiny dip of a valley down by Dodge Center, Minnesota. And there's so many trees around. They have woods and everything that they only have satellite um, internet, and that wasn't acceptable for the companies that I was trying to do. Like we're doing video remote through, to the other side of the world. I'm talking to people
Yep.
in real time in China and trying to like sing songs with these kids. And, sometimes that lag that you have or the bad ping or whatever it is just sucks.
Mhm.
And I couldn't pass the IT test to work at my parents' home. And I would have to like go bunk up, with my brother or my sister or somewhere else to be able to work if I was trying to travel and work at the same time. How the heck do you have good enough internet where you live out on the farm?
So there's two aspects of this. So one on with North Dakota, which is not where this farm is, but on the North Dakota side. So North Dakota has had an incredible vision on this, and in North Dakota, practically every single home, everywhere, regardless of location, out in the middle of the sticks or downtown Fargo, has gig capable internet.
What?
Uh, North Dakota, yep, North Dakota is one of the most connected states in America. It is the best rural coverage in America. We're literally in the upper 99 percentile of our citizenry has awesome internet.
What?
And that is because there was a foresight 20 years ago that the internet was going to become the backbone of the economy. And that foresight allowed the state to really be able to push that across the board. Now, pretty much every other state around them doesn't have that, including Minnesota, where I am.
Yeah.
It's nowhere near that high end internet.
Oh no.
So where I am right now, on this farm, I kind of cheated. I literally went to an internet service provider and said, I will let you put a tower on my property as long as I get internet for the rest of my life. And I literally, you can't see this out the video, but if you could see my window here off to the left, I have a 120-foot tower that sits on the north side of the farm, and that tower provides us internet access, and we get you know pretty decent speeds. We have a little problem with the wind and the snow and the rain on occasion, but for the most part, it's pretty good speeds. But the other good part is it actually means that most of the rest of about a 7 mile radius in all directions can connect to this tower. So as long as you can see the tower, you can get internet here. And so we have other neighbors who put towers on their corn cribs, or they put a tower out of their backyard. So if you drive down here, you'll see all these little pokey 120-foot towers
Right.
connecting the internet for all the farms down here. And this is something that people don't realize is that um, especially so if you're from the inner city and you are from a big city and you have not spent time in rural areas, they tend to think of the rural areas as the backwoods hicks redneck. That's the picture of us. But I'll tell you, I have more IP addresses and I have more cameras and I have more technology here than you have in your home,
Oh, I believe you.
unquestionably, right? And we some of the projects we're working on right now, right? Autonomous farming is a huge project that we're working on in what's called the Grand Farm in North Dakota. It's one of the first farms in the world to be fully robotic, fully autonomous, where the tractor drives itself. There's no human on it. There's, the really cool one is the one with the solar panels on the back that goes and picks all the weeds all by itself. I mean, some really cool technology.
It's like a little
But
Mars
we're looking,
rover that can pick
yep, with a
weeds.
little Mars rover looking thing. It's got little wheels instead of big wheels. That's about it. But that kind of technology is changing the face of agriculture right now. Robotic dairy farms where the cows can go in and milk themselves simply by walking in, and then
Mhm.
they go and feed themselves, and then they get to go out into the fields again. Right? It's super great for the cows. It's super great for everyone because we're able to get better production, but it's fully automated where there's
Mhm.
two humans watching, huge herds, and they're doing it on screens.
Right.
I mean, the
Yeah.
reality is ag is massive in technology today.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, really, they have to be to keep up. But I know that that whole conversation probably evokes a whole bunch of different kinds of feelings in different people. But
It
it's
does.
amazing. It's amazing to think of what we can do now that we couldn't even 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Well, we're rounding up here as far as about an hour. Do you want to just chat about any advice that you'd give people who are trying to decide if they want to work from home or who are just have been thrown into it, in this past year that they might be able to improve their situation? I know a lot of people are just winging it and are getting burnt out and can't wait to get back to the office. And other people are like, hey, we love this. We want to make this, but we need to make it long lasting. Like, for instance,
Yeah.
for me, I noticed a lot of people talk about they start to develop a lot of pain because we're sitting wrong at the kitchen table or whatever. What things have helped you to adjust, and what would you recommend people to consider for the future?
So first of all is change the process, right? And there's defined rules around change, but you you need to take some time to ensure that you do like the change or do not like the change based on real things instead of your emotional response, right?
Hmm.
The reality is most of us were sent home super fast. We didn't get a lot of ability to absorb that change.
Yeah.
Now that most of us have been in this for a year, in theory, you can kind of back away from the emotion and start looking at the reality
Mm-hmm.
and go, okay, what would make this better if I were to stay here, right? And in this environment, so for me, it was frankly getting a little table with a dedicated space, and making that dedicated space so that the dogs and the cats and the goats stay on the other side of the door, right? Um, but having that little
I'm just
dedicated space.
imagining like bleeding happening as you're like testifying.
Well, not as I've been testifying, but it has happened during lots of meetings. I even brought a little baby goat onto a meeting a couple weeks ago so that people could see it and they could name it in the meeting. It was one of our events, um, and Goaty McGoatface was what they came up with, but I don't think it's going to stay with that. So, but uh, but yeah, take that time to step back, look at your environment, and decide what can you improve and make a couple small improvements. They don't need to be massive. You don't need to redesign your home. You don't need to, put $5,000 into, changing a room up. Just look at it and see what are a couple of small things, and then from that decide, is this worth it now? And the reality is that some of us are going to get to choose whether we go back into an office, whether we stay at home, or whether we do both. And most of my team is both hybrids.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us get to make that choice. Some of us aren't going to get to make that choice, and other people are going to make that choice for us.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be able to look at your situation and go, well, what can I do to improve this component of the situation? And that's just a big aspect for people, really to just absorb that and realize that you can make small improvements to make yourself feel better. You mentioned back problems. Well, I got a real chair
Mm-hmm.
now, right? So
Looks like.
my chair before was a nice chair, but not a chair you want to sit in for 6 to 8 to 10 hours a day.
What is this one that you got? I'm assuming you probably researched it.
Oh, now you had to ask me that. I'll have to
Is it a
look that up.
is it a steel case?
No, I don't think so.
My husband's on a steel case. I'm not sure if it's the same or not.
Yeah,
I'm on a super
it's
old one from Mayo Clinic. Do you recognize
it
that
does. I
purple?
was going to
Yeah.
say it does kind of look like a male chair.
Yeah. So, and then you were just talking about the whole putting the internet on your own property. If
Yeah,
we have any listeners who are like sitting out in the middle of nowhere, not that it's nowhere, but in the middle of nowhere in terms of like internet providing internet coverage,
yeah.
how long did that process take? Like, what did you say to the internet company, and like, did you pay them? Did they pay you? Or is there just an agreement that you get free internet? Like, how does that actually work?
So in my specific situation, it was about 3 months. The negotiation on the whole thing was only a few days. The reason it took 3 months is because it took that long to order a tower and get it installed. The tower, uh, it depends on your farm or your land, your property, and what kind of tower you can have, etc. Mine is self suspended, meaning it's a 120-foot tower, but it doesn't require any guidelines. Right. So then there's a big concrete pad underneath the tower, big tower up on the concrete pad. There's no guidelines. And in this neck of the woods, I've got pine trees galore, 70-foot pine trees all around it. So I'm
For
in a
wind?
no-fly zone for all crop dusters and that kind of stuff anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so for us, it was really fast. For somebody else, I mean, depending on where you live, you might need a taller tower. You might need one that's suspended. Those are all things you'd have to work through. But if you go to your local ISPs, I mean, especially if you go to some of the smaller ones, I mean, if you call Verizon and say, "Hey, can you put a tower?" Verizon's like, "Nah, that's not going to happen." But in my case, it's a company called RadioLink Internet. They're a small organization that provides internet services around this side of the state. I know they provide up near Dodge Center, so maybe you can give them a call. But you call those providers. There's a lot of those kind of entrepreneurial folks out there that would love to do that. And they paid for the tower. I didn't pay for that. They paid for the install. I didn't pay for that. And I get free internet forever. I could have maybe got a revenue deal if I wanted to, but
You're like, I
that's
don't
all
care. I
something they could
just
work
need,
out. Yeah,
I just need internet and really good
yeah,
internet. I remember back in the day when people started like putting windmills on their property, and they'd get paid like money, like I don't know, 300,000 a year or something like that. And I wonder if the ISPs are getting more people who want them to put towers, or if they're having a hard time finding people to put towers because of the concerns about, 5G and all these things.
That kind of stuff. It all depends on the area you're in too. I mean, so the this gets a little nerdy, but the frequency that this tower uses is non conflictual with other towers. So this tower will not conflict with cell phones,
Okay.
right? So this one is a different frequency that allows you to be able to connect.
Okay.
Um, you will have to figure that out for your area
Yeah.
if this is something you want to do. And if you're near small communities, a lot of small communities they band together and do this themselves. They can put up one tower between the community. If you get a group of 80 people or something, we've seen that multiple times in this neck of the woods, especially
Mm-hmm.
because southeast Minnesota just didn't have good coverage. But you'd see, neighbors band together to be able to go to an ISP and make it worth it for them to be able to get a tower built. So,
When my husband was interviewing for jobs, he was like on a 15-month job hunt for some time after he finished grad school. And, every single time he'd apply for a new job, I was house hunting. I was like looking at schools and neighborhoods and parks and discovery centers and like, what will this community offer for us? And at one point, he had done 3 interviews with the place out of Kansas City. And I went up with him one day, like on that weekend, because it seemed like it was like ready to. Those people never even let him know if he got the job. He got offered the job here in Arizona before they never even let him know. But we were like house hunting, like looking for rentals and like, whatever. And there was the cutest little house out in the country, and it didn't have anything other than satellite out there. And I was calling all the internet. I mean, we were really kind of putting the cart before the horse here, but as a mom, and I had just had a baby, and like we're just trying to get things set in place. Mayo wouldn't let me work there in that location because I couldn't get internet that was up to their standard. They didn't allow us to use satellite. And so then what people would do is they would dig a cable, and
yep.
Communities would get together and pay the $5,000 or $7,000 to dig that cable out there. But then I called other companies and they said, sorry, we can't dig a cable because there's a river and we can't get past the river. And so I'm thinking about my parents, and I don't remember if it was that radio one that you just said, but I contacted one of those companies to be like, hey, I mean, if I could pay for my parents to get better internet so I can stay at their property when I come to visit, it would be worth it, even if it was just for a few months. But I think it was the tree lines. Like I think this company that I talked to, they like do kind of like a, how do you say it, like an extender type thing. Like they bounce from another satellite, and but the tree lines, we couldn't do it.
Well, there's a ton of options nowadays. So as you said, so fiber along the ground, fiber on the ground is the best way. It's also the most expensive.
Mm-hmm.
It can easily cost $1 million a mile to dig fiber.
Oh my.
So
We
it's
were just looking
it's
at cable.
incredibly, yeah, yeah, and that's the nature of the beast. It's expensive to dig it. It's expensive to put it in. The phone companies and the telecom companies, they're paying that, much less you paying that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one way. Radio internet is a great way for a lot of communities. That's what mine is. Mine is all radio internet here. The other stuff is satellite. And the satellite that you're talking about, there's different kinds of satellite. Now, if you look at the SpaceX side, the Starlink is another one. That's one that is becoming more available everywhere as well. Uh, some of those, I don't know about southeast Minnesota because I haven't looked, but I can tell you it's available in North Dakota. You can get satellite internet through Starlink in North Dakota, but we use it for certain projects across the state. But there are a lot of options nowadays, and you gotta you gotta keep searching for it because the reality is the internet is the electricity of today.
Yeah.
If you don't have your internet, it is very difficult to be able to stay connected to the world.
It's like for the people who want to live in a rural area and be able to work from home, it's it's a hurdle that some people will have to, jump over, that, people who live in the metro areas, like when we live here, it's like easy to have a gig
Yep.
of, speed, whatever. No problem. That's just common, like expected. But, you can have your cake and eat it too if you can get through that.
Hmm.
All right, Sean, shall we?
Yeah.
It's been fun talking to you, my old friend.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a great
please
time.
please give my love to your family, and I have been enjoying watching the goats. So Michelle was actually she was injured while the goats were still pregnant, right?
Yes.
So she was like already on goat watch for like weeks, and then this happened.
Yep. She was on super duper goat watch. She was expecting, in fact, when she had her accident, that was the next thing out of Alex's mouth. And the goats are going to give birth tonight. And I'm like, oh, please, thank you. That's
Did
wonderful.
they? They didn't, did they?
No, luckily it was still like another 2 weeks. But I think he was reacting to mom's reaction,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, so it was still a couple more weeks. But yeah, we were there checking the goats 3 times a day, and that is probably my hardest part here is that Michelle has expected me to take up all her hobbies and keep her hobbies rolling while she's in this situation while I'm trying to work. So that's probably the bigger challenge for me is trying to make sure all of her different critters are doing what they're supposed to be doing while she's unable to be mobile.
You
So
need to bring in like a farm nanny, like someone who can like come in and like watch all the kids, literally.
a nanny, a real nurse, because I suck at that. A real nurse would be great.
Both a nurse
Yeah,
for your
yeah,
wife and a nanny for all the goats.
yes, yes.
Oh, well, good luck. Thank you for taking this time out of your super busy week, and appreciate the conversation. I feel like I learned a lot of things about you that I didn't know. I had never heard your how we met story,
No,
and a few extra helpful things too. Appreciate it.
yeah, no, that's great. And thanks for having me on. Happy to be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, this is April Malone with Sean Riley, and this has been Yes, I Work for Home. Take care.